Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about the macromolecules of life. This topic about macromolecules will be divided into 4 parts, each part being for one of the macromolecules. And today we will be focusing on carbohydrates, which are one of the macromolecules. So before we talk more deeply about carbohydrates, let's delve into the word macromolecules itself. So we know that macro means large, and we can figure this out by looking at the example of a phone lens. If you have a macro phone lens, it can cover a wide range of the scenery that you're trying to capture. So macro means large. From this, we can imply that macromolecules are simply large molecules that make up living things. And now let's look at the 4 different macromolecules. First, we have carbohydrates. Then we have proteins, then lipids, and finally nucleic acids. And today we will be talking about carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are mainly starches, and you can find these starches in bread, cereal, pasta, rice, potatoes, beans, and more foods. These are the foods that really fill you up, and because carbohydrates contain a lot of energy that can be used later, so carbohydrates store and provide energy. But along with being starches, carbohydrates are partly sugars, and you can identify the sugars in the carbohydrates by the ending, the OSE ending. For example, they are glucose, lactose, sucrose, dextrose, and fructose, and there are many more types of sugars in carbohydrates as well. Like I said before, carbs store energy, but it's different for plants and animals. For animals, the energy is stored in the form of glycogen, and for plants, it's stored in the form of cellulose. So the functions of carbohydrates: store energy and are an energy source. So the sugar, the starch, the glycogen, they provide energy and they can store energy for humans and other animals. But along with being an energy source, carbs are also a structural molecule. You can see this in the examples of cellulose and chitin. Remember that cellulose is restricted to plants, and chitin, which is something new that we're talking about, it's for animals and also other living things. So celery. Celery is an excellent example of how cellulose can be a structural molecule. Cellulose in celery provides structure, which makes the vegetable itself very tough. So when you think about it, if you try to break a piece of celery, it doesn't break that easily. It's a very tough vegetable, and it takes a long time to chew because of the fibers that bind it together. And these fibers are what are the cellulose in the celery. Next up, let's look at chitin. So for an example, if you look at the exoskeleton of crabs, the shells of crabs, that is what is made up of chitin. And chitin is a form of carbs, the structural molecule of carbs. So it not only provides an exoskeleton for crabs, but it also provides a cell wall for fungi. Awesome. So on the right, you're going to see 2 pictures. The first one is just how carbohydrates fuel the body. And the second one is a diagram of the structural composition of first, the chitin that is found in the shells of crabs, and second, the cellulose that is found in the structural composition of a tree. So now let's talk about the structure. So going back to the previous slide, in the second picture, you're going to see all of these ring-shaped figures. Now let's talk about what they mean. So carbohydrates are made up of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. The hydrogen and the oxygen should be switched, but the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are going to be in the ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. So 1 carbon per 2 hydrogens per 1 oxygen. And you're going to see this right below. I have the CH2O. This is called a hydrated carbon because the H2O is water, and then we have a carbon that's left over. So the N, you might be wondering what the N is. It's just a variable that can be supplemented for any number as long as you keep the ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. Now, the picture on this slide is very important. It points out the chemical formula of glucose, which is C6H12O6. And very importantly, you should notice how there are twice as many hydrogen atoms as carbon atoms, and twice as many hydrogen atoms as oxygen atoms. So that clearly fits the standard CH2O ratio that is mentioned on this slide, so the 1:2:1 ratio. This is the final slide of the carbohydrates, but let's talk a little bit more detail about the structure. So we can talk about 3 different types: monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. A monosaccharide is a single sugar molecule, and remember how sugars are found in carbohydrates. So let's look at a monosaccharide in the previous picture, glucose, C6H12O6. This is a hydrated carbon when N is equal to 6. Remember how we had that variable N outside of the parentheses? Well, since N was equal to 6, we multiplied each of the elements by 6. So we got C6H12 and O6. Now this is a single sugar molecule because it is just one molecule of glucose. But a disaccharide is when we have 2 linked monosaccharides. You can think of this in a way like it's 2 sugar molecules. So for an example, we have sucrose, which is the common table sugar that you find. Sucrose is actually glucose plus fructose. So in this case, sucrose is a disaccharide because we have 2 different sugar molecules that play a role into its composition. And another example is lactose, which is the sugar that is found in milk. And in lactose, we have glucose plus galactose. So 2 different linked monosaccharides that are chemically composing the lactose. And finally, a polysaccharide is a polymer of many monosaccharides. So we don't have just 2, we have more than 2 monosaccharides. Some examples are starch, glycogen, cellulose, and chitin. All of the 4 that are listed here are made of glucose or modified glucose monomers. The picture on the right is just an example of different monomers and how you can, of different monosaccharides and how you can combine those to make disaccharides or polysaccharides. So this is just the basis. So we have glucose, fructose, galactose, deoxyribose, and ribose. And that sums it up for the carbohydrates section of the macromolecules topic lectures. So just to sum it up, we talked about structure, the monosaccharides, the disaccharides, and the polysaccharides. We talked about the ratio of the elements. We talked about the functions of carbohydrates, and then we talked about what they are. And these are the 4 macromolecules, and that brings us back to the beginning. Hopefully you learned a little bit from this video, and stay tuned for the next couple of parts. Like I said before, the next video is going to be about proteins, then lipids, then nucleic acids, and we'll try to get these in fairly quickly so there isn't much of a gap between these 4 videos. Anyways, please share this video with anyone who you think might be interested or who might benefit from learning the material in this video. If you'd like to recommend a topic to us, please email us at excelledlearning@gmail.com, and feel free to send us any questions there as well. We look forward to hearing from you, and stay tuned for the next videos. Thank you. Bye.